Welcome back, DPV TV viewers. It is Chris Nichols here, and it is time for our flagship mirrorless camera roundup. Now, first off, big special thanks to the camera store for providing a lot of the gear for us to test today. We could not have made this video without them. And speaking of the camera store, I'm joined by some special guests.
Yeah, Chris, it's Evelyn Drake from the camera store here, and I'm going to be shooting with the Nikon Z9 today.
And I'm Kyle Markwart, and I love to take photos of wildlife, and I love landscape. And I'm shooting with the Sony A1, or Alpha 1, as Sony likes to say.
And so that leaves me with the Canon EOS R3. Now, Evelyn and I, we both are camera reviewers on YouTube shows, so we've had time with all three cameras. But Kyle, you're a Sony shooter now. You've been using the A1 quite a bit. And this morning we actually got out, Kyle's friend lent us their beautiful puppy, 10 weeks old, super adorable. And so we got some shots at the dog park. That was great. But we've also taken a lot of photos on these cameras previously. So we have a lot of photos that we've already taken, a lot of experiences we can kind of draw on. But today I think we're just going to have some discussions and talk about the good and bad and rank how these cameras compete in many different categories. So let's get to it.
So let's talk about handling. I got this tiny camera in my hand. It's nice and light. I'm looking at these supposedly mirrorless cameras, and they're heavy, they're beefy, they're huge.
Yeah,
and
they are.
If I did want a beefy camera, I could slap on a grip, and I got that size, but I love having the option of a small and light camera.
I don't know, Kyle, even with that extra grip added, it's just not the same. The Nikon ergonomics feel absolutely amazing, and even though this camera is significantly heavier and bigger, this camera just feels like a tank. I am so confident about this
and it
because
handles
it
like
feels
a tank.
super durable.
It makes your back hurt and your arms probably sore, but right off the bat, you guys are both wrong. This is the ultimate design for a mirrorless flagship camera because, look, I get the integrated battery grip, it looks professional, but it's just the right size. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's just Goldilocks camera. And we've often said how good the Canon EOS mirrorless cameras are designed, menus and buttons, and this is no exception.
So I do concede that these larger cameras have really good handling. Large dials, large buttons, very easy to press. But coming from the Sony A7 III and A7 R3, I find these extra dials to be fantastic. I really like them. It also has this locking dial that I really like, but there's 3 dials and only one of them has the locking dial. I wish they all had it. It's a great addition.
I'm getting second place with the Nikon Z9 for overall handling, but I have to say that I do love it from a Nikon perspective. If you're someone that's coming from the Nikon DSLR line, you're going to feel absolutely at home with this camera, but it is getting second place because it is that much heavier. And don't tell these guys, but it does sort of weigh on you after a little while. A full day of shooting, you do get that shoulder pain.
So an easy first place win for the Canon EOS R3. It's the perfect size and weight, great button control. I love the fact that when it comes to focusing, I've got this AF on smart controller. I can use that to change my autofocusing point, or I've got the joystick, or I've got a great touchscreen, or I've got eye control AF, which works great for me anyways. And so all in all, this is a camera that's easy to set up and get success with.
As far as image quality goes, I love having 50 megapixels.
Oh yeah, I know, me too. I love having 45, which is basically 50 anyways.
Yeah, I love having 24, which is basically 45.
Well, I mean, it's pretty far away. At least we can crop and post.
That's true. What about you, Chris? Can you crop and post?
You guys are my friends, but you both. Okay, third place for the Canon EOS R3. I get it. Like, look, I get great dynamic range, beautiful color on these files, but yes, it's in a different class of megapixel count. It's not going to touch 45 or 50, and I don't have the same croppability or large print sizes available. But for sports and action, I think it's still fine. My main issue actually with the Canon files is the fact that they bake in quite a bit of noise reduction. So yes, your files look clean, but it kind of takes away some of your options in post.
The Nikon Z9 is getting second place, but is very close in resolution as well as low light performance. Where the Sony does get a slight advantage is the fact that the Nikon Z9 actually doesn't have a mechanical shutter at all. And so the Sony gets that slight advantage when it's shooting in mechanical shutter, but when they're both shooting electronic, they're very, very close.
So with the Sony A1, I've got the highest resolution out of the 3 here. So if I don't need the speed of the electronic shutter, I can switch to the mechanical shutter. I can slow down, shoot my landscape shots. I can get the best dynamic range of these 3 cameras. So let's talk about displays and viewfinder.
Okay.
9.44 million dots and then 240 frames per second. That's amazing.
Yeah, okay, but Kyle, first off, we're not playing Call of Duty. Who cares, all right? You don't need 240 frames per second. It's superfluous. And honestly, yeah, 9.44 million dots, I'll say it's great in playback, but when you're actually shooting, the res drops down.
Yeah, well, and not to mention, Kyle, let's be honest here, you barely even shoot with your electronic viewfinder. You like to get down and dirty in the mud, and you're often shooting with that LCD panel, which is crap in comparison to the Z9 and the R3.
Yes, it is.
I am a little jealous of the Z9.
Yes, you have to be jealous of that. And not to mention, I have this really neat hinge. It's very articulating, very durable. And the other thing I have to say is I basically have lag-free shooting through my electronic viewfinder. And I love this electronic viewfinder experience. It's not the highest resolution by any stretch. It's the lowest.
Not the highest. No,
but it's pretty good.
This is the perfect solution again. Okay, 5.76 million dots, fast refresh rate. And I do have not a sexy hinge, but it is fully articulating and easily the best panel on the back. So displays again, Goldilocks. This is
Goldilocks.
Goldilocks wins every time.
Yes, it's true. I have the lowest resolution electronic viewfinder. I am getting last place on this category, but I have to say that for sports and action photography, which this camera is very well tuned to, this is still one of the best shooting experiences that I've had with electronic viewfinder because of that dedicated imaging pipeline. You have lag-free shooting, and so I'm going to give it to the guys that their panels might be better, but the experience is very good on the Z9.
I was shooting with the A7R3 before. Even though that was no slouch in the viewfinder department, I'm finding this is such a huge improvement that I'm really enjoying it. So I do understand that with this rear display that I'm in second place here because I wish that it was a little bit more flexible. I could move it in more positions and a little bit brighter.
All right, so an easy win for the Canon EOS R3. What more is there to say? I don't have to worry about dropping resolution or having to deal with a last-gen resolution EVF. I mean, this is just perfect for a flagship. The back panel is also nice and sharp, and the fact that it's fully articulating is a deep review TV favorite because if you're using this for photos or for video, that design we find seems to work best. You know what else I have that nobody else has? My camera can use its HDR EVF display to simulate an optical viewfinder. This is the perfect choice.
Okay, so since these are all the top-end performance-driven cameras, we need to talk about the burst speed as well as the buffers on these guys. And my camera, hands down, has the highest burst speed at 120 frames per second.
At what resolution?
Yeah, exactly.
11 megapixels.
Yeah, JPEG
Yes,
only.
they are 11
That's your
megapixel
only argument?
JPEGs. But come on, that's spec, that's hardcore.
Come on, I can shoot RAW at 30 frames per second.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
But come on though, okay, first off, you can only shoot 20 frames per second at max RAW, okay?
That's true.
You can shoot 30, but in a lossy compressed RAW. I can shoot 30 frames per second with no loss of image quality.
Oh no, Chris, but you're shooting at about half the megapixels of the Nikon Z9, and not to mention that 20 frames per second is good enough for most applications, and what are you really gaining if you're going up to 30 if you don't have as much detail to deal with?
So first off, we're not talking about megapixels right now, we're just talking about max. And your max and my max, I get more. And then on top of that—
But it's all part of the equation.
10 is more, I get 10 more than you
do get 10 more. Okay,
10.
fine.
20
I'll give you
plus
that.
10 is 30.
We did a buffer test, and to do that, we were shooting in lossless compressed RAW files, and I was able to get about 90 shots on the buffer today, and that's at 20 frames per second. So definitely not the deepest buffer, but it does write very fast, and that's dependent on what kind of card you're using. And the one advantage that I have is that I have two CF Express Type B cards, and these cards are now the fastest on the market. They're gonna keep getting faster, and so I think from a future-proof perspective, this is actually a big advantage for Nikon.
So with the Sony A1, I can shoot 150 frames at 30 frames per second. Yes, it's a lossy compressed RAW, but that's no slouch. I'm pretty happy with the images. This uses CF Express A cards. It's not as fast as the CF Express B cards. So that means the buffer might fill up and it takes a while to empty.
Okay, so I'm going to be gracious here and say that although the Canon EOS R3 wins first place, it is just by a hair. I do recognize that I'm shooting at lower megapixels than the other two cameras, but these are still sports wildlife action cameras, and that's what this is dedicated to. 24 megapixels is plenty, and even better than that, I get to shoot 30 frames per second for 150 shots, and that is in a lossless compressed format, so I don't have any image quality hit there. As well, the write speed on this is fantastic with the CF Express Type B card in there. If I shoot JPEGs, I can basically shoot until the card fills up. So
We're not talking about JPEG.
Let's talk about autofocus. I have to say, me, coming from the A7 III and A7 R3, this is gonna up my game with action and animals.
These are all going to up people's game if they're transitioning from an older camera, previous generation. But I think it needs to be said that Nikon has come the longest way. I mean, they weren't even on the same page really when it came to autofocus tracking compared to Sony and Canon more recently.
Yeah, it's true. And I mean, on your show, you guys are working on an episode right now where you're testing all three of these cameras, specifically the autofocus, right?
Yeah, we've put them through a lot of different tests. We've seen how they performed in indoor shooting scenarios, like shooting Canadian hockey, of course, and shooting things like ice racing, because that's another thing Canadians like to do apparently. And it's close. And so you almost have to look at individual scenarios.
Well, we still got to rank them, so let's get to that. So personally, I really do like the way the Canon EOS R3 performs, but it is in third place. The good stuff, I think in good light, it focuses on people's eyes very well, but especially vehicles and animals, it does a great job with its eye detect capabilities. And I actually personally do like the eye control autofocus selection, but I do recognize that does not work for a lot of people. I mean, there's a lot of calibration involved, and you might still not get it to work. I mean, luckily you have other ways of choosing your autofocusing point, but I think another big finding with the Canon EOS R3 is there's a lot of finesse that needs to be done. There's a lot of menus. You got to customize the autofocus. You got to set up for the right situations. If you do that, it can be very effective. If you don't do it right, you're not going to get a good hit rate. We also found that in low light situations, although it performs well, it probably has the lowest hit rate out of the three. Okay, wait a minute. We're talking about autofocus, but we already had rankings set up. What are you guys doing together in the frame?
Chris, you're not part of this conversation, okay? We got this.
Chris, could you step out of the frame? You're in my shot. Could you please leave? Thank you. Okay, go ahead, guys.
Okay, so we're both standing here because we have a little bit of backstory. We were originally going to give the first place to the Sony Alpha 1, but as we've been doing a lot of discussion, reviewing our images, we're finding that the Nikon Z9 might have a slight edge over the Alpha 1.
Yeah, I mean, the real-time tracking on the Sony is fantastic. If you can get the focusing box right over someone's face, it will be really sticky. You'll get so many hits with excellent focus on the eye, tack sharp.
Real-time tracking autofocus is amazing.
And I shot at different situations, like in dusk after the sunset, and I was still getting shots that previously I would not have even bothered getting.
Yes. Now with the Nikon Z9, this is where things get a little bit interesting. Now, when we're using the 3D tracking autofocus, the interface is just as simple. I mean, it's way better than the previous generation Nikon mirrorless cameras. Now, when it comes to the profiles built in the Nikon Z9, this is where we have more. We have 9 different profiles, and for example, when my team was shooting motorsports photography out at Ghost Lake, we did notice that with the Sony, the real-time tracking autofocus was a bit dependent on where you placed it on the vehicle. So sometimes it would drift off if it wasn't quite in that right sweet spot, especially if the vehicles were flipping and spinning around like crazy on the ice. But with the Nikon Z9, the motorsport profile actually seemed to help it out a lot, and then the Nikon overall with all of my tests always seemed to have just a little bit of an edge when it came to the hit rate.
Yeah, but I think it should still be number 2, right? Because the graphic interface is ugly. It's an ugly graphic. We've always said it.
But I think between the Sony and the Nikon, it's so tight.
So close.
It's so hard to really give it a clear win. But just know that if you have any of these cameras, they're going to be so good.
So we should talk about video, but Kyle, do you want to talk about video?
I mean, I love shooting video, but I don't want to talk about it.
Jordan, do you want to talk about video?
I'll talk about video!
Okay, Jordan's going to talk about video from the Drake cave.
You don't want to talk about it.
Okay, so it's Jordan Drake in the toasty indoors in what I guess is now being referred to as the Drake Cave, and I get the privilege of talking about the video capabilities of these cameras. So let's jump right to the rankings. In third place, it's going to be the Sony A1. Now, I do love the 8K image that comes off of this camera. You've got lots of picture profiles, S-Log2, S-Log3, HLG recording. However, the 4K image on this is not oversampled from the entire sensor. It's full width, but you're not going to get kind of the sharpness of the oversampled 4K from the other 2 cameras. I really like the autofocus. I think this is a great video camera, but it does still fall in third place. Second place is going to go to the Canon EOS R3, which does have oversampled 4K recording. So the 4K image on this is very sharp, very detailed, and you've got quite a few options for picture profiles. It can shoot Canon C-Log, Canon C-Log3, HDR PQ. There's quite a bit of flexibility in this. And really importantly, right now this is the only camera that's capable of recording internal RAW video. So that'll really open things up if you're looking for even more flexibility. The autofocus is quite good, but I do find it struggles sometimes. But the main reason this is in second place is the lack of 8K and the fact that it just has a bunch of weird quirks like a micro HDMI port on this giant body, and the fact that you lose things like your histogram and your level when you're actually recording videos. Canon should have ironed these issues out a long time ago, and it's a pain they're still there in a flagship body. First place is going to go to the Nikon Z9, which just checks all the boxes that I'm looking for in a hybrid mirrorless camera. For starters, we get oversampled 4K, it's very sharp, very good looking footage, but also the ability to record 8K video right to the memory card. If you're looking for very easy to edit industry standard files, albeit absolutely enormous files, this can record ProRes internally right to the memory card. So this would win just based on what it's doing out of the box right now, but in the future we know that the Z9 will be receiving internal Nikon RAW video recording as well as internal Apple ProRes RAW recording, so RAW shooters are going to have a lot of options in the future as well. This is just one of the best hybrid mirrorless cameras for video shooters out there, and it is a clear #1 choice. Anyways, those are my full rankings. Back to my friends and my spouse out in the freezing cold.
Okay, so we're gonna do value just quickly as a talk, but we're gonna factor into our scores. And Kyle, you're gonna lose this because that A1 is so expensive.
It's the most expensive.
Yeah.
But you know, Sony users have no choice. If we want an improvement, we gotta go for it.
None of us have a choice.
choice.
But you know, just again, the Canon, not too little, not too much, Goldilocks. It's right there in the middle, exactly where it should be.
Chris, it's not even that much cheaper than the Alpha One. I mean, they're pretty close. The Nikon is actually significantly lower than both of your cameras. And so I think from a value proposition standpoint, you're getting a lot of camera at the Nikon Z9 price.
Oh, it is a clear winner.
With Sony, I did lose points-wise, but it doesn't really feel like it. It's such a capable camera. What I remember from using older camera systems is that you'd have to pick one camera for the specific use case that you had. And if you're a sports photographer, you would use those faster cameras. But here, it's so capable, I can shoot almost anything. It's fantastic. The image quality is good for landscapes, but for sports and wildlife, it is so snappy. I'm getting excellent results. So you can almost recommend this to anyone.
Oh, you guys, I love a good underdog story. And of course, with the Nikon Z9, okay, yes, we did tie, but I will say that, I mean, there's a lot of areas where it's so close. And I mean, having the edge on the value proposition as well as video. I mean, Jordy Boo just loves the video on the Z9. And there's a lot of camera here for the price point. The one thing we haven't really talked about too much is with the Canon, they're not calling it their flagship camera, but these are.
Well, you're making digs on me in the conclusion, Ev?
Yeah, no, I'm saying this
You
is
are
a good thing.
cutthroat.
No, I'm saying this is a good thing because, you know, Canon still has kind of purpose-built the R3, as you say, for sports and action, where these two cameras are considered more, you know, the hybrid, the shoot everything cameras. And so there's still room for Canon to...
Oh yeah, no,
you know.
I'm gonna destroy you guys when whatever the flagship camera is when it finally comes out. We'll have to do this again. All right, so competitive rankings aside, I think you guys get the idea. You've got 3 fantastic camera systems here, and hopefully this helps you decide which would be best for you. Big special thanks to our guests here, Evelyn Drake from the Camera Store TV with all of her expertise, and Kyle Marquardt as well for his insights on the Sony system. Do check out not only Evelyn's video coming out about their autofocus rankings, I think you're gonna really enjoy that, but also Kyle's website to see a lot of his fantastic work. Otherwise, please leave your comments below, let us know what you think. Please like and subscribe to the channel, and as always, thank you guys so much for joining us. We'll see you again soon for another episode of DPV TV.